Hello, I'm Andy Hales from the University of Mississippi, and in this video, we're going to be learning the basics of R. And in order to do that, we're going to go through 4 operators or symbols that are central to navigating around smoothly in R. And the good news is that if you can learn these 4 symbols, then you're well on your way to actually understanding and producing your own R code. So, to begin, the first thing we need to do is load up the package we're going to be using. So here and throughout most of these, we'll be using a package called the Tidyverse. Now you'll recall, if you haven't already installed this, you'll need to. And if you have, you can just run library. And the Tidyverse is a cluster of packages that lets us do wonderful things like manage our data files and produce nice graphs. So that is our friend. Now, after we've done that, we need to read in our data. And as I mentioned last time, I'm simplifying things here by just pulling this straight from the web. And if you download the code we're using here, you can access that from the description. There's a link where you can download this code, and it'll work for you. You won't have to mess around with working directories or all that. You can just read it and move on with your life. Now, once we've read in this survey, we can see that the data file here is pretty big. We have all sorts of columns about people's self-esteem. They estimated the number of Skittles in a typical bag, and we even have metadata here about when they took the survey. That's great, and I'm glad it exists, but it's a little messy, and I want to simplify things for this illustration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to select just the 2 columns we want to work with today, the participant number and their estimate of the Skittles that they're working with. So I'm going to use the select function from the Tidyverse and simplify things. And when I do that, we can see we have just the columns we want to work with. Now that's purely aesthetic here. Nothing bad would have happened if we left those other columns in. But I also want to use this as an occasion to remind you that what happens in R stays in R. So I've changed this data frame here in our environment, but the original data frame is totally untouched. By the way, I'm using this word data frame. Data frame is just what R calls a data set. So here we've named it data. That's our data frame or data set. Okay, we are locked and loaded here. So let's go through these 4 operators. The first one is one we've already encountered before, and it's this hashtag that we use to indicate that we're commenting for our future self rather than producing actual code. Comments are great, and I'm sure in the future you'll write all sorts of comments to yourself and never, ever, ever write a bunch of code without actually explaining it. I would never do that. No one else would ever do that. Get in the habit of leaving comments for yourself. The next operator is this $sign. And here we get into changing the actual mechanics of code. So what is the $sign for? Well, it's simply a way to tell R which of the columns we're going to be working with or doing an operation on. So let's start with just the data frame itself. We've named it data, and if I run data, it'll just print the whole data frame for us. All of the 2 columns together. It's just spewing out the data frame that we've got up here. Now, if I want to get information about just the participant column, then I can write here data $participant, and that tells it we're only interested in the participant column. And here it just prints it out, not even as a data frame, just as a list of numbers. All right, that's obviously not so helpful, but the reason we would want to do that is because if we're ever going to do something like take the average of people's Skittles estimates, we could use a function like the mean function here. If we feed that the name of the column, then we can compute that the average number of Skittles estimated here is 47.14286. Cool. All right, so the $sign is how we say which of the variables within the data frame we're working with. And I'll just point out here, a nice thing about RStudio is it helps you out when you're typing things along. If you type the name of the data frame and then you put a $sign on, it knows that you're going to be looking for a column, and so it automatically pops up the names of all of the columns in your data frame here. And if you're feeling lazy and don't want to type, you can just click that, and there you go. It's helped move you along a little faster. Okay, so dollar signs are how we identify individual variables. This brings us to our third operator here, which is something called the pipe. Now, the pipe is this symbol, or often it also appears as this symbol. And those are virtually interchangeable. And I'm sorry, I know that's maddening that we'd have two symbols for the same thing. It's a long story, but they both work in pretty much the same way. So the pipe is an absolute game changer. Let's start by looking at an example of how miserable life would be without it. We've got this line here. It's a monstrosity. Imagine you're trying to make sense of this, and you're reading like a human from left to right, and you see that we're going to be pasting something. What are we going to be pasting? Well, something that's been rounded. What are we going to be rounding? Well, something for which we've computed the mean. What is that thing? Oh, it's the estimated number of Skittles. All right, now that's great if you're a machine and you can keep that all in your brain at the same time. I can't. It gets worse though, because as you read on further, you'll recall all the way back here, we're going to be pasting something. Well, what are we pasting together? We're pasting all of this with this sentence, Skittles estimated on average. If that's confusing, it's kind of supposed to be. It's just a hard way to read code. And guess what? You're not even going to be reading code. You're going to be writing it, and this is an even harder way to write code. However, it does work. If we run this, we see it produces the sentence, 47 Skittles estimated on average. Okay, fine, but there's got to be a better way. That's where the pipe comes in. The pipe simply tells us to take what's on the left and pass it along to what's on the right. So we can perform the same operation more coherently by using the pipe, which I always want you to read as and then. So the better way we could have produced this is by saying, take the estimated number of Skittles and then compute the mean, and then round it, and then paste it with the rest of the sentence, Skittles estimated on average. And here we see that produces the same result, but it's easier to read, it's easier to wrap your head around, and it's so much easier to write. So that is the pipe. That is a vehicle for letting us work from left to right, and it makes R 1,000 times easier to work with. This brings us to our final operator here, which is this symbol, which is called the assignment operator. This is how we essentially save our work within an R session. So if I'm going to be changing my data frame, I want to tell R to actually register those changes and save them in the data frame so that the next time I do something with the data frame, those changes are available to work with. So here's an example. Suppose I take the data frame, and using our pipe operator, I take the data and then I mutate, or that's a term for creating a new column, where I compute the estimate in grams by taking the estimate column we had earlier and multiplying it by 2. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because remember we have these estimates of the people generated a guess of how many Skittles are in a bag. Suppose I want to express that in units of grams rather than in units of Skittles. Well, I Googled it, and it turns out Skittles weigh about 2 grams, which doesn't quite seem right, but whatever. Let's just entertain that Skittles weigh 2 grams. And so if we perform this transformation here, it'll produce a new column called estimate in grams. And I'm going to run, notice here, I'm running just the operation here where we compute this, and it will again print out a data frame for us, but it's a new data frame with this extra column that's computed the new value as requested. However, look up here at our original data frame, the one that's saved in our session here. It still has just 2 variables. I haven't changed data. If I want to change data, I need to use the assignment operator to tell it to update data based on these operations down here. So if I run this entire chunk, we will see data now has 3 variables, including the one we just computed. That only happened because we told it to assign the output of this results to an object called data. Now, because data already existed, I'm essentially saving over the data as it was a moment ago. I could have given data a new name, and that would be equivalent to saving as, like a new file where you save as and you give it a new name. That's also something you can do, and then you'd have two data files up there that you could work with if you wanted. Okay, so now that we have this column estimate in grams, we can do things with it. Just like before, we can take the estimated number of Skittles in grams and pass it along, compute the mean, round it, and paste the sentence. There are 94 grams worth of Skittles estimated on average. Cool. Now, we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't save it. Okay, there's one important thing about the pipe, or the assignment operator, and this is like, you know, sometimes when there's signs in public spaces telling you not to do something and you realize that's clearly an indication that someone has done that stupid thing in the past. Well, here's the stupid thing that I have done many times in the past, is when you're trying to make something show up, if you're assigning it to an object, R doesn't know to present it to you. So suppose I want to make a histogram, just to illustrate what I'm talking about here. I've got this code that will produce a nice little histogram, and I run it, and no histogram shows up. Oh, that's so frustrating. Well, turns out I didn't ask R to show me a histogram. I asked R to create a histogram and to save it as an object called histogram. And it did do that. If you look up here in our environment, we now have an object called histogram. You have to go through the extra step of asking it to show you that histogram, and you can do that just by running the word histogram or by telling it to explicitly print the histogram. Those will both give you the same result. And you see when we do that, there's our histogram. So just remember, when you're assigning things, you are updating them, you're changing them, but you might have to do an extra step if you actually want to behold the product of your work. And in the spirit of beholding it, let me move there. Right, it's a nice histogram. Okay, so those are the four operators. It's worth pointing out here, these are clumsy figures to type, right? The pipe looks like that, and the assignment operator, it looks like that, and these are combinations of like the or symbol with a greater than, and then over here you have to type a less than. It's a whole pain. There are keyboard shortcuts. I recommend learning them. I think they're slightly different on Mac and Windows, so I won't go through them individually here, but it is worth your time to give that a quick Google and start using keyboard shortcuts if you find that you're frustrated with typing these out individually each time. There you have it. Those are the four operators. If you can get your head around those, then you pretty much know how to code in R. So we will pick up next time with a few more basics and go from there. See ya.